What is Iron Mountain and what is this hoax that occurred in 1967?
Okay, so Iron Mountain at the time was a nuclear bunker for executives to flee to. When the bombs started falling, they thought, get in helicopters and fly off to these luxury bunkers with chandeliers and cinema suites and all sorts of things 100 miles north of New York City. And of course, there were a couple of flaws in that plan, but,
Hello, United States. How are you? People are Bengal, myself, Mundrama from India. And today I'm going to react on a video having titled US Conspiracy Theories, How 1960s Facts Escalated. So this is the video of channel named The New Statesman. So to subscribe this channel, hit the bell icon and subscribe me too. So without any delay, let's get started.
What is Iron Mountain and what is this hoax that occurred in 1967?
Okay, so Iron Mountain at the time was a nuclear bunker for executives to flee to. When the bombs started falling, they thought, get in helicopters and fly off to these luxury bunkers with chandeliers and cinema suites and all sorts of things 100 miles north of New York City. And of course, there were a couple of flaws in that plan, but big companies invested in this. It was also a document store and so on. And it had been like an iron ore mine and then a mushroom farm, but it was created as this in the early Cold War because there was a sort of craze for bunkers. So that's the kind of very Cold War-y kind of resonant setting.
Okay, so Iron Mountain is real.
Iron Mountain is real.
Iron Mountain is real.
And I should say there is a corporation named Iron Mountain which takes its name from the same site but has nothing to do with this story because that happens later. It's a completely separate thing. But Iron Mountain is a phrase that people will know from that as well, possibly. Anyway, the report from Iron Mountain is a complete hoax. It takes its name because the story about the Iron Mountain nuclear bunkers and so on for executives is breaking at the time that they're coming out with it. And this is in early 1966. Now, obviously, the Vietnam War is going by this point. But there's a brief moment where it looks like peace might break out. And Wall Street reacts in a curious way. It dips. There's what's called a peace scare. You might think that peace would be good, right? And the prices would go up, but they don't, they go down. And this is spotted by these three satirists, Victor Navasky and his two colleagues, sitting in the office of a satirical magazine on Fifth Avenue. And they think this is a bit weird. Maybe we can do something with this. So they decide to invent the story of a top secret government report, which has supposedly been commissioned by Robert McNamara under Kennedy to scope out what would happen to America if permanent global peace broke out. The joke being it would wreck the economy and destroy society. And this report is so incendiary in what it recommends would have to be done instead that it has to be suppressed. And they bring in a writer called Leonard Lewin, who's slightly older, and he has another kind of agenda, not so much about the Vietnam War and the amount of money being spent on it and how it's supposedly brilliant for the economy. That's more about the Cold War. As I say, this is why Iron Mountain is such a perfect setting. It's more the sort of thing Dr. Strangelove was talking about. It's the idea that there's these kind of people in think tanks, which at that time meant kind of defense think tanks, who have this very cold, as he sees it, inhuman, logical way of thinking about things. So if there's going to be a nuclear war, much better for 50 million people to be killed than 100 million. And we just need to be grown up about it.
So this shadowy elites thinking up disastrous futures in their bunkers far away from ordinary people is the idea.
Exactly. That's certainly the kind of the stuff that it keys into. I mean, what they're trying to do is satirize the impact of war and the threat of war, but it certainly keys into this long-standing vision a lot of Americans and people here too have in their heads of a kind of dark cabal at the heart of power. Anyway, they take this to a publisher, very reputable publisher called the Dial Press, which publishes like Norman Mailer and James Baldwin. And they say, yeah, fine, we'll publish this as though it's real, and we won't tell our sales staff that it's made up. So it's published as though it's non-fiction once Leonard Lewin has created this report in November 1967, by which point the war is going really badly. And so the New York Times sees this and phones the White House and says, is this real? And the White House said, we don't know, we'll have to check, as you would. And it takes them 5 days to check. I've got the memos as they're doing it, going up to the president as they're kind of worrying about this. There's also checks in the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency and in the Pentagon. And this is what the satirists wanted. They wanted just this sense of uncertainty. If you could believe that it's possible that this report is real, what does that tell you about how the government's thinking? Because what Leonard Lewin comes up with is not just the idea that war is going to the end of war is going to wreck the economy. He comes up with a whole set of alternative things you'd have to do instead to replicate the beneficial effects of war, such as introducing a sophisticated form of slavery to keep young men under discipline, making them play blood games, using eugenics to curb the population.
So properly dystopian stuff.
And it's satirical, right? It's meant to be outrageous. You'd have to invent fake alien scares. You might have to poison the environment to have a unified enemy. So it's meant to be deliberately outrageous. But this is, as I say, to get people to think. So if I believe this maybe even could be real, what does that tell me about what the government's doing in Vietnam and with the nuclear deterrent? So it causes this big hullabaloo when it's published in 1967, and they just kind of watch it unfold.
But it's not real. They come clean about it not being real, and yet the denials don't end the story.
Exactly. Leonard Lewin only actually formally confesses in 1972, so 5 years later. But it had become fairly clear, after a while that it was a hoax. And then there's a big debate about who wrote it. So this is the point when Chomsky's becoming famous and Kissinger, and people think they may have written it. And it's quite telling how many people they thought could have written it. But no, as you say, eventually it kind of falls out of print. The kind of problems it's satirizing, America having so much money it blows it all on war, is kind of a good problem to have by the 70s. And Leonard Lewin tries to get it republished in the 80s, and he can't. Until in 1990, he's contacted and told that actually it has been republished. It's been republished by fascists who think it's real. Because, as you said before, it fits into that image of the dark cabal at the heart of what we'd now call the deep state, which means ordinary, real, patriotic Americans' ill will. So because of this set of alternatives that I mentioned, you can attach all kinds of things to it. So environmental policy now looks like this secret plot from the 60s to use fake environment pollution or real environment pollution, but done deliberately to suppress the patriots.
Well, this is really interesting because it started off as a hoax concocted by people with left-wing sensibilities, concerned about war, concerned about capitalism, concerned about the military-industrial complex. But then because it slots into all these different anxieties, I guess, it gets seized upon by the right, who have this idea of elites, I guess, or of the government, sort of quite a libertarian view of the government being a force for evil as opposed to good.
Yeah, and the ticklish thing about this is that there are quite a few chimes between how the sort of disaffected left of the 60s and 70s see the Central American state and how the disaffected right of the 90s see that same state. Quite a lot of the people in the 90s who picked this up are Vietnam veterans. It becomes a big deal in the militia movement. A lot of them point to this as evidence of the malign intent of the deep state. And what this comes down to, I think, is the kind of weird, jarring, slightly traumatic impact of America becoming a superpower. Because America's not meant to be this great grand Leviathan. America rebelled against the Leviathan in 1776 and suddenly emerges from the Second World War as the most powerful nation the world's ever seen. It's become its own former enemy in a way. And the idea that you have this big national security state, you have something called the CIA now, which never used to exist, you have all these restrictions, is alienating and frightening both to certain people on the left and to people on the right. It just depends who's feeling more embattled, who embraces these stories more. But the big difference is that the people creating this in the 60s are satirists, the people embracing it later are conspiracy theorists. Now, there's actually quite a lot of similarity between satire and conspiracy theory, but there's also a pretty obvious and pretty important difference.
So, the Iron Mountain was real, for sure. But the stuff happened there wasn't. Are you guys, agree with me or agree with my opinion or not? Please tell me in the comment section. And from which country people are watching me, please tell me this too. So, that was an era of Vietnam War. So during 1950s, and now after World War II, you people know very well that America emerges as a global power, and now at present time, America is a global superpower. Undoubtedly, you guys definitely agree with me that now US is a global superpower. America has the greatest, world's largest military, having a largest economy all over the globe. I think 23 or 24 trillion dollars economy, and So this is, with my opinion, this is a cycle. Every nation go through the cycle of inflation, and then the inflation rate goes down, and then yeah, and this is like that. So what is your perception and your opinion on this video? Please tell me in the comment section, and the comment section is open for you people. And tell me from which country people are watching. So we'll meet you in the next video. Till then, take care, bye bye, and please suggest me more content like this in the comment section. We'll meet you in the next video. Till then, take care, bye bye. It's me, Naman Verma from India, signing off.